They told me it would be an honor. The black ships brought me to Holy Terra 3 years ago, and I have spent every day since in the Scholastica Psychana, learning to channel my gift without inviting damnation. I passed every test, mastered every discipline, never once faltered in my faith, or allowed the whispers from beyond to take root. When the Adeptus Custodes came for me yesterday, golden and terrible in the morning light of the Emperor's palace, I knew I had achieved something remarkable. Not everyone selected from the black ships survives long enough to serve. Most are burned out in the first months, their souls torn apart by entities that slip through untrained mental defenses. Others go mad, screaming themselves hoarse in reinforced cells deep beneath the Scholastica. I survived. I thrived. And now I would be given the greatest privilege any psyker could imagine. The custodian who escorted me through the inner palace did not speak. He did not need to. His armor gleamed with a light that seemed to come from within, and his very presence was a sermon. I walked 3 paces behind him, as prescribed, my hands folded in the sign of the Aquila against my chest. My heart was beating very fast, but I told myself it was excitement, not fear. For 3 years, I had heard whispers about the process of selection. The Administratum keeps careful records of every psyker brought to Terra, cross-referencing bloodlines, psychic resonance signatures, behavioral assessments, and 100 other factors I did not fully understand. My instructors had told me my compatibility scores were exceptional. 97th percentile in psychic stability, 94th percentile in faith-based resistance to chaos corruption, perfect physical health, genetic markers indicating a bloodline stretching back to before Old Night, unsullied by mutation or deviance. I was, in the words of the testing inquisitor, nearly ideal. Nearly ideal for what, they had not said. But now, walking through corridors where the very stones seemed to hum with ancient power, I would learn. The walls around me were not merely decorated with imperial iconography. They were made of it. Every surface was inscribed with prayers in 1,000 languages, most of which predated the modern Administratum script. Some were inlaid with gold. Others had been carved by hand, the work of centuries of devotion compressed into corridors that stretched for kilometers. The ceiling was so high I could barely see it, lost in shadows that seemed to move with a life of their own. Servitors passed us occasionally, their faces blank, their augmetic limbs clicking and whirring as they went about eternal tasks. None looked at me. I did not blame them. In the presence of a custodian, all other humans became as insignificant as insects. We descended. The path took us down, always down, through levels of the palace I had not known existed. The air changed as we moved deeper, becoming warmer, drier, filled with a static charge that made my robes cling to my skin. My psychic senses, normally kept tightly shuttered to avoid drawing unwanted attention, began to prickle with an awareness I could not quite name. There was power here, not the hungry, pulling sensation of a warp rift, but something older, vaster, more controlled. It felt like standing next to a star that had been bound in chains of prayer and gold, burning but contained, waiting for something I could not articulate. My breathing quickened. The custodian continued walking, his pace never changing, his massive form seeming to fill the corridor ahead of me. After what might have been hours, we reached a chamber. It was not large, considering the scale of everything else in the palace. Perhaps 30 meters across, circular, the walls covered in cogitator banks and pict screens displaying data I could not parse. A tech priest of Mars stood at the center, his red robes immaculate, his visible augmetics polished to a mirror shine. When we entered, he turned, and I saw that his face was more machine than flesh. Optical lenses whirred as they focused on me, a vox grill where his mouth should have been clicked softly as he processed information. He made the sign of the cog, first toward the custodian, then toward me, the gesture strangely reverent. Subject 874 Theta 9, he said, his voice synthesized and flat. Compatible, confirmed. He gestured toward a door I had not noticed, set into the wall and sealed with locks that looked older than the Imperium itself. The chamber awaits. The custodian turned to me. For the first time since we had left the upper levels, he spoke, his voice deep and resonant, like stone grinding against stone. You have been chosen to serve the Emperor himself. What you will experience is beyond mortal understanding. You will be transformed. You will become part of the greatest work of humanity's salvation. Do you accept this burden willingly? I did not hesitate. I accept, I said, my voice steady despite the fear that had begun to coil in my stomach. I am his servant. I will do whatever he requires of me. The custodian nodded once. Then he turned and left. The door through which we had entered sealed itself with a hiss of ancient hydraulics. I was alone with the tech priest. He approached me, his movements precise, mechanical, his augmetic limbs clicking with each step. From somewhere within his robes, he produced a data slate and held it out to me. You will read this, he said. It is required. I took the slate. The text on it was dense, written in High Gothic, formatted in the style of an imperial edict. It took me several minutes to parse it fully, and even then, I was not certain I understood everything it contained. The essential meaning was this: I was to be connected to the Golden Throne. My psychic essence would be drawn into the machine, joining with others who had come before me. The process would be painful. It would be permanent. There would be no return to the life I had known. In exchange, I would be part of the greatest act of devotion in human history. I would help sustain the Emperor. My soul would become a thread in the tapestry that kept him anchored to reality, fighting the forces that sought to tear humanity apart. I signed the document with a stylus the tech priest handed me. My hand did not shake. I was proud of that. Follow, the tech priest said, and he led me through the sealed door. Beyond was a corridor unlike anything I had seen before. It was narrow, barely wide enough for two people to walk abreast, and it sloped downward at a steep angle. The walls were not stone or metal, but something that looked like glass, smooth and dark, reflecting my face back at me in distorted fragments. The temperature rose with every step. Within minutes, I was sweating beneath my robes, the fabric sticking to my back and legs. The air tasted of ozone and incense, a combination that made my sinuses ache. The static charge I had felt earlier was stronger here, making my teeth hum, my fingertips tingle. I could feel the presence more clearly now. It was massive, incomprehensible, pressing down on my psychic senses like a weight that threatened to crush me flat. What is that? I whispered, unable to stop myself. The tech priest did not slow his pace. The throne, he said simply. You are feeling the edge of its presence. When you are connected, you will understand service. There was something odd about the way he said that last word, a strange inflection, as though he was emphasizing it for a reason I did not understand. But I did not have time to dwell on it. The corridor ended, opening into a chamber so vast that my mind struggled to process it. The golden throne room was not golden. That was the first thing I noticed. The name, I realized, was metaphorical, or perhaps historical, referring to some earlier configuration. What I saw was a cathedral of machinery, a space so enormous that the far walls were lost in shadow, the ceiling invisible high above. At the center, raised on a dais that must have been 30 meters tall, was the throne itself. It was not a chair, it was a mountain of technology, a fusion of archaeotech and psychic engineering, cables and conduits and devices whose purposes I could not even guess at writhing and pulsing with a life of their own. Lights flickered across its surface in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Steam vented from ports I could not see, filling the air with a haze that made everything seem unreal, dreamlike. And there, at the very heart of the machinery, barely visible through the layers of shielding and power conduits, was a figure. The Emperor. I could not see him clearly. No one could. The light around him was too bright, too intense, a radiance that seemed to burn through my closed eyelids when I tried to look directly at it. But I could feel him. Every psyker can feel him. He was a beacon in the warp, a lighthouse in a storm, the single point of stable reality in a universe that wanted to tear itself apart. He was dying. He had been dying for 10,000 years, and yet he lived, sustained by this machine, by the faith of trillions, and by something else. Something I was about to become part of. "Here," the tech priest said, gesturing toward a platform that extended from the base of the dais. I climbed up, my legs shaking now, adrenaline and fear mixing with a religious ecstasy I could not fully control. There were others on the platform. I had not noticed them at first. They were arranged in a circle around the base of the throne, each one connected to the machinery by cables and neural links, their bodies supported by metal frames that held them upright. There were perhaps a dozen of them. All were psykers. I could sense that immediately. Their minds were open, unshielded, radiating power into the machine in a constant stream. Some were mumbling prayers, their lips moving soundlessly. Others were silent, their eyes closed, their faces slack. One, a woman no older than myself, had her eyes open, and when I met her gaze, I saw something there that made my stomach clench. It was not fear, it was not peace, it was knowledge. She knew something, and she was trying to warn me, but she could not speak, could not move, could only stare as I was led past her toward an empty frame at the edge of the circle. "Stand here," the tech priest said. I obeyed, stepping into the frame. It adjusted itself immediately, metal arms extending to grip my wrists, my ankles, my waist, holding me upright but immobile. The tech priest began attaching cables to my body, neural plugs sliding into ports that had been implanted in my spine during my training. Each connection sent a jolt of sensation through me, not quite pain but not pleasant either, a tingling numbness that spread from the insertion points outward. I tried to focus on my breathing, on the prayers I had been taught, but the presence of the throne was overwhelming now, pressing against my mind with a weight that made it hard to think. "When the connection is activated," the tech priest said, his vox grill clicking, "you will experience disorientation. This is normal. Do not resist. Resistance causes unnecessary suffering. You will feel the throne drawing on your psychic essence. This is the purpose. You will feed it your strength, your soul, and in return, you will become part of something greater than yourself. You will understand service." There it was again, that inflection. But I did not have time to question it. The tech priest stepped back, his augmetic fingers dancing over a control panel I had not noticed, and then the world exploded into light. The first thing I felt was heat. Not the heat of fire or the sun, but a heat that seemed to come from within, as though my blood had turned to molten metal. It spread through my chest, my limbs, my skull, a burning that made me want to scream, but I could not because my body was no longer entirely mine. The neural links had activated, connecting me to the throne, and through it, to something vast and incomprehensible. I could feel my psychic energy being drawn out of me, pulled through the cables like water through a pipe, flowing into the machine. It was not gentle. It was not gradual. It was a torrent, a flood, and I was drowning in it even as I was being emptied out. I tried to close my mental shields. An instinctive reaction drilled into me during training. Do not let anything in. Do not let anything out. Control is everything. But the shields would not hold. They shattered like glass, and suddenly I was open, completely open, my mind exposed to the full force of the throne's power. I could feel it probing me, examining me, testing the strength of my soul. It was not malicious. It was not even conscious, in the way I understood consciousness. It was a machine, vast and ancient, and it was hungry. The pain was indescribable. It was not localized to any one part of my body. It was everywhere, all at once, a sensation of being pulled apart at the seams and stitched back together incorrectly. My fingers went numb first, the sensation in them fading to a distant tingling and then to nothing. I tried to move them, to clench my fists, but they would not respond. The numbness spread up my arms, into my shoulders, down my spine. I was losing my body, piece by piece, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. But worse than the physical pain was the mental intrusion. The throne was not just drawing on my psychic power, it was integrating me into itself. I could feel my thoughts, my memories, my sense of self beginning to fragment, to dissolve. Images flashed through my mind, disconnected and chaotic. My childhood on a hive world whose name I could no longer remember. The day the black ships came. The faces of my instructors at the Scholastica. The prayers I had recited every morning. All of it was being pulled away from me, absorbed into the machine, and in its place, I was being filled with something else. I could feel the presence of the other psykers, the ones connected to the throne around me. Their minds brushed against mine, fragments of thoughts and emotions that did not belong to me. Fear, resignation, a terrible, aching loneliness, and something else. A vast, cold awareness that I could not name. I tried to hold on to myself. I focused on my name, repeating it over and over in my mind like a mantra. I am 874 Theta 9. I am a servant of the Emperor. I am here by choice. But the words began to lose meaning. My name was not mine. It was a designation, a label applied by the administratum. Who had I been before that? I could not remember. My parents' faces were gone, dissolved into the static haze that was filling my mind. My home was gone. My past was gone. I was becoming nothing, a hollow vessel, and the throne was filling me with its purpose. And then, through the chaos, I felt something else. A presence, vast, ancient, burning. The Emperor, he was there, at the center of the machine, and I was connected to him now, my psychic essence flowing into the great work that sustained his existence. I tried to reach out, to touch that presence, to communicate, but it was like trying to grasp smoke. He was too large, too diffuse, spread across a space that defied comprehension. But I could feel him, and in that moment, I understood something terrible. He was aware. He knew what was happening. He had always known. Every psyker fed to the throne, every soul consumed to keep him alive. He felt it, he experienced it, and he could not stop it. He was trapped, locked into this machine, unable to die, unable to truly live, sustained by the constant sacrifice of those who worshipped him. The realization was worse than the pain. It broke something inside me, some final barrier that had been holding me together. I wanted to scream, to rage, to reject what was happening, but I could not. The throne did not care about my fear. It did not care about my anguish. It had a purpose, and I was part of that purpose now. Whether I willed it or not, time became meaningless. I could not tell if hours had passed or days. The numbness had spread to my chest, my face, my thoughts. I was losing the ability to form coherent ideas. My mind was fragmenting into pieces, each one drifting away into the vast network of the throne. I could feel the other psykers more clearly now. They were not separate from me. We were all connected, all part of the same system, our individual identities blurring together into a collective consciousness that served a single purpose. I could hear their thoughts, or what remained of them, prayers, mostly. Fragments of litanies repeated endlessly, a desperate attempt to hold on to something familiar as everything else was stripped away. One voice was clearer than the others. It was the woman I had seen earlier, the one who had tried to warn me. She was still conscious, still fighting to maintain some sense of self, and when her thoughts touched mine, I felt a flash of recognition. She had been here longer than I had, weeks, maybe months. She had learned things, she had seen things, and now, she was sharing them with me. Her final act of defiance against the machine that was consuming us both. The Golden Throne is not a machine, she whispered into my mind. It is a prison, it is a tomb, and we are the bars. I did not understand at first, but she continued, her thoughts flowing into mine with a clarity that cut through the haze of pain and confusion. The Emperor is not dead. He is not alive. He is suspended between states, trapped in a moment that has lasted 10,000 years. The throne keeps him there, anchored to reality, but at a cost. It requires constant psychic energy, a constant flow of souls to burn as fuel. That is what we are, fuel. We are being consumed, slowly, our essence drained away to power the machine. And when we are used up, we do not die. We do not fade into the warp. We remain. We become part of the throne itself, embedded in its structure, our consciousness trapped in a state of eternal suffering. I wanted to reject her words. They were blasphemy, heresy, the lies of a mind broken by pain. But I could feel the truth of them. I could sense the others, the hundreds, maybe thousands of psykers who had come before us, their souls woven into the machinery, their thoughts reduced to static echoes that filled the air like white noise. They were screaming, all of them. Silently, endlessly, they were screaming, and no one could hear them. No one except those who joined them. The woman's presence faded, her mind slipping away into the collective. I tried to hold on to her, to keep her with me, but it was like trying to hold water in my hands. She was gone, and I was next. The numbness had reached my head now, spreading through my skull like frost creeping across glass. I could no longer feel my face. My vision was fading, the bright lights of the throne chamber dimming to a grey haze. I was losing my senses, one by one, my connection to the physical world severing as I was pulled deeper into the machine. But I was still conscious. That was the horror of it. I was still aware, still thinking, even as my body became irrelevant. I could feel myself spreading out, my mind expanding beyond the boundaries of my skull, connecting to the vast network of the throne. I was becoming part of it, my thoughts merging with the thoughts of countless others, my identity dissolving into the collective. And at the center of it all, I could still feel him, the Emperor, burning, suffering, aware. I tried to speak to him. I tried to pray, to offer some comfort, some acknowledgement of his sacrifice, but I could not form the words. My voice was gone. My sense of self was gone. I was no longer 874 Theta 9. I was no longer a person. I was a thread in a tapestry, a single note in a symphony, a drop of water in an ocean. I was nothing. I was everything. I was part of the throne. And then I understood what the tech priest had meant. You will understand service. He had said it with that strange inflection, because he knew. He had known what would happen to me, and he had known because it had happened to him. I could feel him now, his presence in the network, his mind woven into the machinery. He had been a psyker once, selected and fed to the throne, but something had gone wrong, or perhaps it had gone right, in some terrible way. He had been partially integrated, his consciousness split between the machine and a physical body, a servitor shell that allowed him to continue functioning, to continue overseeing the process. He was still there, in that red-robed form, tending to the throne, connecting new psykers to the system, and he would be there forever, trapped between states, unable to die, unable to escape. I wanted to hate him. I wanted to rage against the injustice of it, the cruelty, the sheer monstrous efficiency of the system, but I could not. The emotions were fading, bleeding away into the collective. Fear, anger, hope, despair. They were all dissolving, becoming part of the vast, cold awareness that was the throne. I was being purified, stripped down to my essential function, my psychic essence, refined and concentrated, flowing into the machine to sustain the Emperor. I could feel the others more clearly now. All of them. The hundreds of psykers currently connected to the throne, their minds open and bleeding power into the system. The thousands embedded in the machinery, their souls trapped in eternal service. They were all around me, pressing in, their thoughts a cacophony of prayers and screams and static. I tried to isolate myself, to maintain some boundary between my consciousness and theirs, but it was impossible. We were all part of the same thing now. We were the throne, and we were burning. Constantly, eternally, we were burning, our souls consumed to keep the Emperor alive. I could feel the drain, the constant pull of power flowing out of me and into him. It was not gentle, it was not sustainable. I was being used up, piece by piece, my psychic essence torn away and fed into the machine. And when I was gone, when there was nothing left of me to burn, I would remain. I would be trapped here, in this state, for eternity, or until the throne failed, or until the Emperor finally died. Time meant nothing. I existed in a state of constant present, unable to remember the past, unable to imagine a future. I was aware of my body, distantly, as a thing that still existed but no longer belonged to me. It was supported by the metal frame, cables attached to it, fluids dripping from ports I could not see. My heart was still beating, my lungs were still breathing. But I was not there. I was somewhere else, spread out across the network, my consciousness diffused into the machinery, and in the moments when I could still think, when some fragment of my original self surfaced from the collective, I wondered, how many of us were there? How many psykers had been fed to the throne over the centuries? How many souls were trapped in this machine, burning endlessly to sustain the Emperor? The black ships brought thousands to Terra every year. Not all were suitable, but many were, and those who were suitable were brought here, connected to the throne, consumed. The numbers were staggering, incomprehensible, and yet necessary, because without us, without this constant sacrifice, the Emperor would die. And if the Emperor died, the Astronomicon would fail. And if the Astronomicon failed, the Imperium would fall apart, isolated systems drifting in the darkness, easy prey for Xenos and Chaos. I understood, finally, what it meant to serve the Imperium. It meant this. It meant being consumed, slowly and painfully, your soul burned away to keep the machine running. It meant suffering eternally, so that others could live in ignorance of that suffering. It meant being forgotten, a statistic in the administratum records, a number added to the tally of necessary sacrifices. I had been told it was an honor, and perhaps it was, but it was also a nightmare, and I was trapped in it, unable to wake, unable to die. There were moments of lucidity, brief flashes when I could still form coherent thoughts. In those moments, I tried to hold on to memories, fragments of my life before the throne, but they were slipping away, dissolving into the static. I could not remember my home. I could not remember my family. I could not remember my name. All that remained was the purpose: sustain the Emperor, feed the machine, burn until there is nothing left. And then I felt something change. A shift in the network, a disturbance in the collective consciousness. Someone new was being connected, a fresh psyker, their mind bright and clear, and untouched by the horror that was about to consume them. I felt their fear, their confusion, their desperate attempt to understand what was happening. I wanted to warn them, to tell them what they were about to become, but I could not. I had no voice. I had no way to communicate beyond the fragments of thought that leaked through the network. And even if I could have warned them, what would I say? That they were going to suffer? That they were going to be consumed? They already knew that. On some level, they had signed the documents. They had accepted the burden, just as I had. The new psyker's presence grew stronger as they were integrated into the system. I could feel their psychic essence flowing into the machine, their soul beginning to fragment and dissolve. They were fighting it, trying to maintain control, but it was futile. The throne was too strong, too vast, too hungry. Within hours, they would be like me. Within days, they would be nothing. A thread in the tapestry, a drop in the ocean, and they would burn, just as I was burning, just as all of us were burning. I wondered if the Emperor could feel us individually, if he knew our names, our faces, our stories, or were we just fuel to him, indistinguishable drops of power feeding into his existence. I reached out, tentatively, trying to touch that vast burning presence at the center of the machine. For a moment, I thought I felt something. A flicker of recognition, a moment of contact, but it was gone before I could grasp it, and I was left with only the certainty that he was there, suffering as we suffered, trapped as we were trapped. The tech priest's words echoed through my fragmenting mind. You will understand service. I understood now. Service was not glory. Service was not reward. Service was consumption. Service was eternal suffering in the name of a greater good that we would never see, never experience, never truly comprehend. Service was being reduced to nothing, to a function, to a tool used and discarded without thought or mercy. And yet, in some terrible way, it was still service, still necessary, still meaningful. Because without us, the Emperor would die. Without us, the Imperium would fall. Without us, humanity would be consumed by the darkness that pressed in from all sides, hungry and patient and infinitely cruel. We were the barrier. We were the sacrifice. We were the price paid so that trillions of humans across the galaxy could live their lives in ignorance of the true cost of survival. I tried to feel pride in that. I tried to find meaning in the suffering, but all I could feel was the burning, the constant drain, the endless dissolution of self into the machine. There was no glory in this. There was no honor. There was only necessity, cold and brutal and absolute. My body was failing now. I could sense it, distantly, as though it were happening to someone else. My heart was slowing. My breathing was becoming shallow. The neural links were compensating, keeping me connected to the throne even as my physical form began to shut down. Soon, there would be nothing left. My body would die, and the metal frame would hold it upright, a corpse wired into the machine, and I would be trapped inside, my consciousness embedded in the throne, unable to escape, unable to die. I thought about the woman who had warned me. She was still there, somewhere in the network, her thoughts mingling with mine and thousands of others. I wondered how long she had left, how long until her body failed completely, until she became one of the embedded souls, trapped in the machinery forever. I wondered if she could still feel fear, or if that too had been burned away. I wondered what would become of the Imperium. If this system would continue forever, psykers fed to the throne in an endless stream, or if someday it would fail, if the Emperor would finally die, or if he would endure eternally, kept alive by our suffering. I wondered if anyone would ever know the truth of what happened here, in the depths beneath the palace, or if it would remain a secret, known only to the custodians and the mechanicus, and those of us who had been consumed. There was a sound, distant, rhythmic, like machinery cycling. I realized it was my own heartbeat, echoing through the network, slowing, fading. Each beat was weaker than the last. Each breath was shallower. I was dying, finally, truly dying. And yet I was not. My consciousness remained, tethered to the throne, unable to escape. I was trapped in a state between life and death, burning endlessly, my soul a candle that would never go out because the machine would not allow it. The new psyker's presence grew stronger as mine grew weaker. They were screaming now, their mind fragmenting as mine had fragmented, their identity dissolving as mine had dissolved. I wanted to reach out, to comfort them, to tell them it would be over soon, but it would not be over. It would never be over. They would join us, and we would all burn together, a chorus of suffering that sustained the Emperor. I felt my last heartbeat, felt my lungs still, felt my body go slack in the metal frame, and still I remained. Still I burned. The throne would not let me go. It could not let me go. I was part of it now, woven into its structure, my soul a component in the vast machine that kept the Emperor alive. And in that final moment of dissolution, as the last fragments of my identity scattered into the collective, I understood the true horror of the Golden Throne. It was not the pain, it was not the suffering, it was the eternity of it. The knowledge that this would never end, that I would burn forever, conscious and aware and unable to escape, that I would be fed to the machine, and the machine would consume me, and I would become part of something vast and terrible and necessary. The Emperor endures. That is what they say throughout the Imperium, a prayer and a promise. The Emperor endures, and he does. He endures because we burn, because our souls are the fuel that keeps him alive, because we are fed to the Golden Throne, and the throne consumes us, and we endure with him, trapped in eternal service. I tried to pray. One last time, I tried to form the words, to offer some final devotion before I was lost completely. But the words would not come. My voice was gone. My mind was gone. Myself was gone. All that remained was the burning, the endless burning, and the knowledge that I would never be free. Somewhere, far above, in the light of Holy Terra, another psyker was being selected. Their compatibility scores were being checked. Their bloodline was being verified. They were being told it was an honor. They were being prepared for transport to the inner palace. And when they arrived, they would be connected to the throne. And they would burn, just as I was burning, just as thousands before me had burned. The cycle would continue. It had to continue. Because without us, the Emperor would die. Without us, the Imperium would fall. Without us, humanity would be lost. And so we burn. Forever. Eternally. We burn so that others may live. We are fed to the golden throne, and the throne consumes us, and we become part of the great work, the terrible machine that sustains the God Emperor of mankind. This is what happens when you are fed to the golden throne. You understand service.